Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Allison Tate, and I'm the founder and principal of Averi Wealth Management. We're an independent investment advisory firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. I work with entrepreneurs, physicians, and corporate executives to develop strategies to help them grow and protect their wealth. I'm so excited that you are joining us on this inaugural webinar series where I attempt to address some common questions around wealth creation. Today's topic is all about generational wealth, primarily how you create it, maintain it, transfer it, and then at the end, we'll discuss an action plan to get started. So let's talk about what generational wealth is. When I think about it, it really comes in the form of two components: tangible assets and intangible assets. When I think through tangible assets, that's going to be your investment portfolio. It could be real estate, that could be the home that you own, or rental real estate portfolio that you've created. It could be cryptocurrency, it can be art, a family business, or other collectibles. When I think about intangible assets, those are your education, your family network, your connections, your pedigree. Basically, those intangible assets help create opportunity for you to create and build wealth. So, why is this topic so important? 70% of wealth is lost when it's transferred to the second generation. And what's even scarier, 90% of wealth is lost when it's transferred to the third generation. And this is so important because historically, certain groups of people, particularly those who are Black, Brown, and LGBT, have had some barriers or challenges that have really affected their ability to accumulate and transfer wealth. But now more than ever, I feel like those groups and everyone else are really poised to take advantage of a lot of opportunities that are available in the marketplace to help close the racial wealth gap. And you could tell that everyone is focused on generational wealth just by looking at Google Trends. Web searches for generational wealth have increased exponentially over the last 5 years, and they've particularly taken off in the last year and a half. So when we talk about creating wealth, like what does that even mean? And for me, it's a really simple formula. It's the income that you generate, less your expenses. That money left over is what you would invest. So as you think about wealth creation, most of that comes for us through our day jobs. And so it's really important while you're on your day job that you are enhancing your skills, taking on more responsibility, and making sure that you're putting yourself in a position to get promoted over time so that you can earn more money. And sometimes this could even mean that you have to get a business coach to help you get to the next level. If there are instances in which the income that you're bringing in from your day job is sufficient to cover your expenses, but doesn't leave enough wiggle room for investment, you might want to consider a side hustle. The side hustle, I think to really take advantage of it, you want to make sure that you are leveraging your best skills. Say, for example, you're really good at writing. You could become a website copywriter, social media content writer. You could write speeches for people. There are unlimited opportunities in which you can leverage your core skills to make extra money that you then invest for the future. Let's talk a little bit about your expenses. So the money is coming in, you're starting to make more over time. And what can naturally tend to happen is something called lifestyle creep. Lifestyle creep occurs where you start upgrading your lifestyle as you earn more money. So, with each raise, each promotion, each bonus, you start spending a little bit more. So maybe that means that you are upgrading your car, you're taking fancier vacations with your family, or just, splurging on fancy clothing. I think the key is really making sure that you are growing your income, but keeping your expenses in alignment so that you can avoid this lifestyle creep. And one way to help do that is to invest your raises. So, say, for example, you received a 3% raise Instead of using that to support your lifestyle or maybe to buy more things, you can use those funds and invest them in maybe your retirement plan, through your employer, through a brokerage account, through an IRA or Roth IRA. So that kind of leads us into talking about investing. So when I think about investing, your goal is to really build a portfolio that outpaces inflation. So inflation has been top of mind this year. Inflation rate through August was 8.3%. So what that means is that if you have an investment portfolio that did not earn 8.3%, it actually means that you have lost purchasing power for the year. When I think about investing, you want to make sure that you're creating an investment portfolio. But what is that? What does it consist of? To me, that consists of stocks and bonds, ETFs, crypto, real estate, and art primarily. The goal is to make sure that you're building a portfolio that really is focused on your financial goals and values, your risk tolerance, in addition to your investment time horizon. And the key is that you want to create a portfolio that has multiple streams of income that you can access at various points of your lifetime. And then the key here is that you really don't want those assets to be all correlated, right? In fact, that you want them to be non-correlated. So you want to have so let's just say you have an investment portfolio. Well, you don't want to only invest in the S&P 500 because it means that your portfolio value is going to rise and fall at the same time. You want to make sure that in addition to your S&P 500 exposure, you also have some money allocated towards small cap stocks, maybe even some foreign stocks. So again, while they may rise and fall, they all don't rise and fall at the same time or at the same level. You also want to have a diversified portfolio that allows you to create some tax minimization strategies as you go throughout life, because those different buckets of assets that you'll create have different tax consequences. Even kind of looking at the rental portfolio that you might look to create, people could take the rental income that they're receiving from those properties and use them as a part of their retirement income strategy. So when I think about investing, I really use it, I really try to focus it from a values based approach where I really like to ask my clients, well, what do you value the most? And typically, what I find is that sometimes their perceived values may not be in alignment with their actual spending. And so what it means is, we just need to kind of retool the plan to say, okay, we have the income coming in, but let's make sure that we're putting in all the places that matter to you the most. So the first things you're going to want to take care of is your needs, right? So take care of your home, making sure that you have a roof over your head, lights, water, um, and then we move on from your needs to what we consider your wants, which would be you spending for fun, going on family vacations, and other items. And then we look to some of the other things that you value. So maybe you want to start planning for your child's higher education. So we want to put a few dollars into maybe a 529 plan for that child. And you also want to pay your future self by investing money in a brokerage account, which ultimately goes to purchase investments in the stock market. Or maybe you want to look to leverage a retirement account, such as an IRA or Roth IRA. Again, the key part about investing is making sure that you have a very diversified strategy. And once you've identified each of your goals and the dollar amount that you should be allocating towards each of those items, you want to automate the strategy. So every time you get paid, make sure that you've created a system where money gets automatically funneled into each of those buckets. This is really important because it helps create this discipline and intentionality that's really needed to create wealth. And the last part about investing is that you want to start now. It is never too late to get started. So now that you've amassed a portfolio, we need to make sure that it is sufficient for you to live on during your golden years. So let's talk about some ways to maintain your wealth. The first is we're going to continue to be mindful of your spending in retirement. I've had clients in the past tell me that they'll actually spend less in retirement than they do today. And I understand the concept, right? Because you might have younger families, you might want to put them through private school, college. And so you think that, like, once you get them out of the household and off the payroll, that your expenses will go down. And what I've often found is even though your children are out of the home, you now look for other ways to spend your time. And ways to spending your time typically involves a use of funds. So you could be traveling more, you could be buying more vehicles at a more frequent cadence than you did in the past, or maybe you need a renovation on your home. It is actually interesting to note that people only spend about 1.5% less in retirement than they do when they're working. So that means if you're a household that makes $400,000 per year, you will typically only spend about $6,000 less in retirement. You also want to make sure that you have a good tax saving strategy. Again, this is where you have those various different buckets of income that you've accumulated throughout your lifetime. And so you need to know how to strategically pull down on those funds over time in a very tax efficient way, because that helps to preserve your wealth. You also want to minimize what I call the use of bad debt or credit card debt that's recurring. So you want to make sure that you keep your utilization low on all credit cards, or preferably try to use a credit card like an American Express, which requires you to pay the balance off in full every month. You also want to be mindful of how much you are financially helping your family. I know that this can be tough because as you progress in your careers, you achieve a certain level of success, there may be an expectation or a strong desire to help your family, which is fair, but you want to make sure that you don't do it to your own detriment. And the last point is I want to make sure that you have enough life insurance, because really this is your key protection should everything else proverbially go wrong in your retirement plan. So if you happen to spend down your estate faster than you anticipated throughout your lifetime, at your death, the asset or your estate can be replenished with life insurance on a tax-free basis. So let's talk about how we transfer wealth. You want to prepare for the transfer of wealth during your lifetime and at your death. And you can do that in a couple of ways. So during your lifetime, there's a couple of things that you could do. You can look to retitle certain accounts. So, for example, your bank accounts, your checking accounts, savings accounts could be titled transfer on death or payable on death. And what this titling means is that upon your passing, that asset passes directly to the intended or stated beneficiary, and it avoids probate. Another asset titling process is called joint tenants with rights of survivorship. And this is typically a structure that you own with your spouse. So, for example, if your spouse were to pass away, you would inherit their share, but you would also receive a critical step up in cost basis, which can be a little difficult to explain, but it's a part of your tax mitigation strategy. And you also want to make sure that you create an estate plan during your lifetime that also directs assets upon your death. So let's talk about the components of an estate plan. A lot of people believe that all they need is a will, and that's just not true. But let's talk about what a will does. A will only directs your personal property, so cars, art, jewelry. It also can identify guardians if you have minor children. And the last thing a will does, it names the people that you want to settle your estate. That's it. A will does not necessarily dictate how you want your assets to be distributed to your heirs. In order to do that, you need a trust. The trust is super important because, again, you're going to name the individuals who are going to manage that trust upon your passing. You are identifying distribution terms for that trust that helps keep the assets within the family for generations. And then you can determine how you want those assets to be passed. So, for example, you may want your children to inherit your wealth, but you want to make sure that they're at a stage in their life where they are financially responsible. So you could potentially create age-based distribution provisions where maybe that child gets a portion of of their inheritance at the age of 25, 30, 35. You can make up the age that makes the most sense for your family dynamics. And you can also dictate how much you want them to receive at that time. So you creating a trust is a way for you to basically control your estate from the grave. Other aspects or other components of an estate plan are what I call ancillary documents. So that would be a healthcare power of attorney and your financial power of attorney. Let's start with the healthcare power of attorney. This is also called a living will. In this document, if you potentially become incapacitated, so let's just say, for example, you had COVID, you were on a ventilator and in the hospital, heaven forbid, but you needed someone to make healthcare decisions on your behalf. That healthcare power of attorney would kind of step in, identify that person. They'd be able to speak with your physician, obtain your medical records, and consult with your doctor to help make what they believe would be the decision that you would make if you were not incapacitated. It also can identify whether or not you want to receive life sustaining measures. So, whether or not you want to be resuscitated or whether or not you wanted to receive, food or other forms of nutrition. It's also super important that if you have any child that's over the age of majority, and for most people that's the age of 18, they need to have their own healthcare power of attorney, particularly if they're away at college, because you may not, if they have an event or some type of, medical event that occurs, you may not be able to get to them quickly. So they need to have a healthcare power of attorney, like at their hand, at their disposal, so that maybe one of their friends or roommates or someone who lives closer can act on their behalf until the rest of the family is able to join them. And the last component is a financial power of attorney. And in that document, that person is making financial decisions for you while you're incapacitated. So they're still paying the bills, keeping the lights on. What's so important about having an estate plan is really thinking about what happens when you don't have one. And a recent example is the passing of Chadwick Boseman, who died with a $3.8 million estate and no will. So when you die without a will, it basically means that you die intestate and you have to go through probate court. There's no way around it. The challenge is, depending upon what state that you live in, probate court can be very expensive. So after the cost of going through probate, having the funeral, and paying other fees, $1.5 million or 40% of the value of his estate was lost through fees. And that remaining $2.3 million was split evenly between his parents and his wife. So was it his intent to actually split his estate 50-50 with his parents and his wife? Who knows, because there was no will that actually memorialized his wishes. And unfortunately, Chadwick's story isn't the only one. There have been other, celebrities that have died without a will, most notably, Prince and Aretha Franklin, among others. So let's talk about how you create an action plan and what your next steps are. The first thing you want to do is start the conversation with your financial advisor. You want to review all of your assets, sit down and identify your financial goals, and think through your values, and create a plan that successfully addresses those items. The key benefit about working with a financial advisor is that as your wealth grows or as your life changes, they can pivot that plan accordingly to make sure that they're still helping you protect and grow your wealth. Some financial planners can also sit down and think through the appropriate estate structure for you and your family, or think through how to title some of your assets. And that can really be beneficial and save you money as you go to the estate planning attorney and who's going to actually draft the documents for you. And financial advisors can also help you identify how much life insurance that you need to cover you should you pass away prematurely, or should you happen to spend down your assets in retirement and you need them to be replenished. The second step in your action plan is to hire an estate planning attorney. You don't want to wait until you've already built the wealth, particularly if you have minor children. You need to identify guardians for them. You do not want the courts to identify guardians for your children. You do not want them to make that decisions for you. The third thing you need to do is hire a tax preparer who's really specialized in tax planning. Because again, part of maintaining wealth is to make sure that you have a proper tax mitigation strategy. I thank you so much for spending time with me this afternoon in this webinar. I know we've covered a lot. If you would like to have a more in-depth conversation about how I could help, feel free to reach out to me via email or phone. And now I will also take some time to answer any questions that have come in.